What's going on, everyone? Here for match day 21 MLS action. After we just had a midweek slate with 13 games, we get another packed slate here with 14 games on this Saturday. And despite the hot weather, despite the short turnaround from last weekend's games, this midweek slate had goals galore for the most part. We had some really, really good matches. We had a lot of standout individual performances, including 2 hat tricks. We had Peter Musa for Dallas, a team that's been really, really struggling to find its form offensively. He scored his hat trick at home against Minnesota in a 5-3 win. And then we had Musa and Mihailovic for the Rapids. They went on the road and 3-0'd St. Louis, who's been struggling in their own right, but they had a pen early in or later on in the first half of that game to make it 1-1 potentially, and they missed. And then the Rapids just ran away with it in the second half. And then Miami, without their stars, no Messi, no Suarez, etc., beating the Crew, who have just been back and forth lately, but the sloppiness the Crew showed is just not something you'd expect from a Wilfred Nancy side. But they've been on the road a lot lately, even with those couple weeks of rest that everyone got. They've been on a huge road streak trip, including that CONCACAF Champions Cup final, and they're going to be back at home here soon. And then the best game of the week for sure, Philly versus Cincy. Cincy at home. Cincy without a couple of their center backs, and Philly just in a huge rut right now, and losing Julian Carranza to Feyenoord. And Cincy went up ahead a couple times. Philly tied it late, made it 3-3 super late. We got like 10 minutes of stoppage time, and Lucho Acosta just doing what he does, a brace and the winner in stoppage time to just carry this team on his back, still in that MVP form. He's been doing what he does his whole career with Cincinnati, and they're looking to go back-to-back shields here. And just an insane midweek slate. But now we're looking ahead to this short turnaround once again. 14 games to go over, so let's just get right into those. First match between Columbus and Kansas City. Columbus hosting, and they're sitting in 6th, while Kansas City is 13th in the West. Columbus is coming off that Miami loss, which obviously, like we talked about, was very, very sloppy, not up to the standards of the team, especially against a really weaker Miami side for their standards. And I just think they're going to really be happy to be back home here, because they haven't been home in about a month or longer, it seems like, just checking the schedule. And Kansas City, in their own right, obviously, wins have been hard to come by. They have 6 losses in a row on the road. So it's just been a complete disaster. Vermees has really overstayed his welcome as the longest tenured coach, but nothing's been working. The players are aging, and they just got another loss. They put up 3 goals at home to RSL, but they still lost 4-3. So the defense has just been probably the worst part of everything, and it's hard to trust them here. I think Columbus is just too dangerous. Even if they rotate a little bit, I feel like they rotated a little bit in the back for that Miami match, so their defense should be stronger here, especially against one of the worst productive offenses in the league. And Aiden Morse only has a couple games left in him before he leaves for preseason training, probably to Middlesbrough. So I think he's going to want to leave on a high and pick up a couple wins before he goes. And I just think Columbus will be too much. I'm going to say 3-0 for the Crew. Next game is between DC United hosting Houston, and DC with another just head-scratching result. They had a home game against Atlanta. They struggled to score against what has been another really poor team this year in Atlanta. They got 1-0 result in that game, and Houston, on the other hand, hosted the Sounders. That was a 2-2 result. And DC is now 7 games without a win. I think it's just, for me, it's a little bit time to accept that they're just not going to be the force to reckon with that we thought they would. The offense has been not performing up to standards, especially with having Benteke up there. The pieces around him aren't doing, providing the most output. And Dynamo, on the other hand, have been really, really solid defensively. So they're losing Carrasquilla finally. He's actually going to be gone now because he came back before Copa America for some reason instead of staying with the squad after playing those friendlies. I just don't see how DC figures out how to break down Houston here, and Houston in their own right struggling to create, especially without Carrasquilla. So DC's defense also can't be really trusted. it's hard to say which way this will go because of both teams kind of struggles on offense, but DC has a really poor defense. So even at home, I don't see too much of an advantage for them here. I'm going to go 1-1 draw. Cincy hosting New England in this one. Cincy is 2 points back of the top spot in the East where Miami's sitting, and in that same sense, 2 points off the Shield as it stands. And they have 2 games in hand on Miami, so they're sitting really pretty right now. That huge win against Philly like we talked about, and they're just doing the business at home. Everyone's contributing. Lucho Acosta is involving all of his teammates in action, especially the younger players like Kelsey, while their striker options have been tested. And New England in their own right, who actually had a bye during the midweek slate, so they're going to be well rested here. New England is actually on a 3-match winning streak. They beat Red Bulls, Nashville, and the Whitecaps, 2 of those being at home, one of those being during that international window, but still impressive in its own right. They're still bottom of the East, but they've been scoring goals recently, and Cincy just gave up 3 without 2 of their center backs, like we talked about, Robinson and Miazga. And Philly was not looking good before that game. Obviously, still not looking too good since they lost, but they scored 3 in that game against this weakened Cincinnati back line without Carranza, without Gazdag. So I have the hunch that New England is going to contribute here, but Cincy should just be too much. Way more quality in this side, and it should be another high-scoring game as long as we don't see too much rotation. So Lucho is going to play as always, and no matter who starts up top, I trust this team to get the job done. So I'm going to say 3-1 Cincy in this one. Red Bulls hosting Toronto in this one. Red Bulls sitting third after a 2-2 draw, coming back from 2-0 down on the road to Montreal. And then Toronto, on the other hand, a second loss in a row, an ugly loss at that. Both ugly losses at home, first being to Chicago last week, and then this past one to Nashville. And Red Bulls were without Forsberg for that Montreal game, but he was training ahead of that match, so I would expect him to be available for this one. But still, they're without Morgan, they're without Coronel in the back, and now Frankie Amaya has been sold, one of their midfielders, to Toluca. So he's going to be departing. I still think this team has enough, replacements and a good enough system, especially if Forsberg plays, to get the win here. Toronto just been obviously not in high spirits with these back-to-back losses. Red Bulls are 5 wins, 4 draws, and no losses at home so far this season, so it's hard to bet against them at home. And Toronto's defense has just been falling off. Giving up multiple goals to those 2 teams we just mentioned is not really is a huge sign for worry. So I think Red Bulls definitely shouldn't really be tested here by Toronto, who might be also without Bernadeschi due to illness. So I think this should be a pretty straightforward 2-0 win for the Red Bulls. The second and third worst teams in the East go head-to-head in this one. Orlando City hosting Chicago. And Orlando hasn't won a home match in their last 6. And they just had a 2-2 draw on the road against Charlotte, but they went up in that match. And against a red card, Charlotte dug deep to get a point there. Orlando still very much struggling, obviously. Chicago sitting just 1 spot above them. But I will say that they are looking so much better without Shaqiri. 4-match unbeaten streak without him. 2 wins in a row now. They beat Toronto the past weekend, and they had a bye during the midweek slate. So they're going to be a little bit more rested here. They do have to travel, obviously. But this was a 1-1 draw in the reverse fixture a couple weeks ago. So anything could happen here. I do fancy Chicago's chances. Orlando without multiple key players once again, with Gallese, Cartagena, and then Maguire and Muriel just haven't been working out. The system just hasn't been working out. Brecalo is also gone in the back line, so I could see the Fire getting a point here at least, and getting one of their first wins against Orlando in God knows when. They're definitely more in form right now. It is another road game, which are never simple in MLS, but it couldn't come against the more really out of shape and opponent that's lacking in confidence. So I say a draw. Another draw might be on the cards here, leaning towards the Chicago win, but I'm gonna be conservative. I'm gonna say 1-1 between these two teams. The Union hosting Charlotte, while they sit in 10th, Charlotte in 5th. And yeah, Union let another point slip away in that match against Cincy. Baribo, to his credit, got a brace, so looking like a decent replacement option up top, but still no Carranza, no Gazdag. Andre Blake's gone for Copa America, but I'm not sure he would be playing or will be playing for Jamaica, or would be playing for the Union if he was available. And yeah, the back line just hasn't lived up to standards. They only have one win at home this season. Unbelievable for Jim Curtin's side under what we're used to in his tenure, and just winless in 7 as well. So still, there's too many problems at the back. A little bit better offensive performance for sure this last week, but Charlotte, on the other hand, just the home form has been absolutely outstanding. Really no notes on that one, but impressive to come back down a man at home and get that 2-2 draw against Orlando. On the road, it's been a bit more of a mixed bag, so depending on the rotations here, it's hard to call as well because their defense hasn't been as solid on the road. Philly will definitely be looking to kind of get rid of some of those demons in terms of their poor home form. So I really don't see much separating these two because Charlotte's offensive production hasn't been the greatest, and Philly's kind of just been up there with St. Louis in terms of the draws and just disappointing results. So I think Charlotte's too stubborn to just open themselves up too much, and this could be a game that Charlotte steals, but I'm going to go for another draw here. I'm going to say 1-1 as well. Minnesota at home against Austin. Minnesota with just one win in their last 5. They just suffered that huge 5-3 defeat to Dallas, which was a little embarrassing for, Dallas has obviously been struggling so much, gave up that Musa hat trick. And Austin, on the other hand, no wins in their last 5. They've only scored in 4 out of their 9 road games, so they've been shut out in 5 of those 9. But Minnesota's defense isn't very reliable. They're also without 2 of their better top striker options in Pukki and Oluwuse. So, but still, I do trust their reserves a little bit more, especially against this Austin team that's just so poor defensively, especially the type of chances they're giving up. I think Minnesota at worst draws here, but I think they can squeak by. I don't want to trust their defense because Austin tactics are pretty park the bus like, especially on the road, but I think this could be a little bit open here, and I trust Minnesota to squeak by. They only have 1 loss in 9 home games this year, so I'm going to go for a 2-1 Minnesota win. Nashville at home against NYCFC. Nashville off that huge win against Toronto on the road. Sam Surge got a brace in that game, got one super, super late to get a massive 3 points for very, very struggling offense. And NYCFC now 2 losses in a row. They lost to Crew at home over the weekend, and then now they went on the road. I'm going to give them a little bit of leeway here because they had to travel all the way across the country, played Galaxy. They got shut out. I mean, getting shut out to the Galaxy is really hard to do with just how much that defense concedes, but they did get Neal back for that game as well, so I kind of don't know how to take it. I'm not the highest on this NYCFC offense, especially on the road. I mean, they do have 3 wins. They had 3 wins in a row on the road before that loss, but they've been mostly getting by in their home form. Nashville's defense has definitely improved recently, and I think that's a big win for their confidence. They get to be back at home here. It's hard to really trust either of these two sides in this situation, but I think the travel is going to be, definitely weighing more on NYCFC, and I think they're at a bit of a disadvantage here. I think Nashville locks this down and gets a gritty 1-0 result at home, more so what they're used to. St. Louis against Atlanta at City Park. St. Louis only has 3 wins on the season, and it's just getting really embarrassing recently. 3 straight games shut out. As we mentioned, they missed a pen in that last game against Rapids to put themselves back in it and give themselves a chance. And man, they just have so many injuries in the past couple weeks and really, really fragile defensively as well. And the offense, they've been getting decent chances, honestly, especially with Lowen back, but the strikers just haven't been it. They've got a couple key attacking pieces coming later this summer, but they're not here yet. And Atlanta, on the other hand, they've won 2 matches in a row now on the road, and they do have to travel here again. St. Louis gets to stay home, but Atlanta, a really shocking 1-0 win at DC because their defense hasn't been up to par as well. But I don't really want to trust either of these defenses as well. I think St. Louis can expose Atlanta a little bit more. I think they've been just a little unlucky. They're really kind of due for a win at some point, right? Especially with the attacking pieces they got. I think Lowen just has enough. Almada scored a banger to get that win against DC, but otherwise they weren't completely threatening. I think there's goals in this match, once again, just based on the transitional play these teams like to play in, the pressing St. Louis has to offer. And I think just the fact of the matter, Atlanta has to keep traveling here. St. Louis gets to stay home. I'm going to say St. Louis finally gets a very rare win this season instead of a draw and gets a 2-1 win against Atlanta. Rapids get to go back home in this one after that huge 3-0 win against St. Louis on the road. Montreal on the road here after a bit of a home stretch. And Rapids back-to-back wins, back-to-back shutouts. They were definitely a little lucky to keep that shutout against St. Louis. But nonetheless, 2 huge wins in a row. And they get this home advantage in this one, obviously with the altitude. Montreal has been one of the worst road defenses, one of the worst defenses in general, but especially on the road, giving up the most chances for statistically. And yeah, Colorado, even if they rotate a little bit here, I definitely like them in this one. It's hard to trust Montreal. They are unbeaten in their last 5, but 4 of those games are at home, and 4 of those were draws. So they have gotten a couple pieces back. They got Kokoro and Martinez back, so a little bit added depth in terms of the attacking department, but it's just so hard to trust their defense as we've just mentioned. They gave up that 2-0 lead at home to Red Bulls side without Forsberg, so it doesn't really take too much creativity to break down this defense. And Rapids defense has been pretty respectable. It's definitely been worse on the road, but they're at home here. So I expect this bit of a win streak to continue here. I don't see many problems for them. Navarro, Mihailovic, they're all been in super form goal scoring wise. So I'm going to go for a 3-1 Rapids win. If you can tune into any match this weekend, it needs to be this one. First in the West against the third in the West. 2 of the top teams in the league for sure, especially offensively. RSL at home. They're on a 15-match unbeaten run right now. Unbelievable. They're pushing for that record, which is 19. And they get a great matchup, definitely match of the week in my opinion, against LA Galaxy, who have won 4 out of their last 5. Their offensive form is crazy. The only thing here is whether Ricky Puig plays, because he hasn't played in their last 2. I think definitely partially saving him for this match maybe, since he didn't play last game, but it just depends how severe that injury is. And yeah, I mean, I expect for a match like this, there really shouldn't be too much rotation. RSL only had to travel to KC midweek, so LA got to stay at home. This won't be a long road trip as well, so RSL obviously with the advantage. This was 2-2 in the reverse fixture in LA, and LA needed a literal last-second goal on a pretty big goalkeeping mistake to get a point in that one. So, and their road form obviously isn't as good as their home form. RSL's defense is definitely much more consistent. I think RSL extends this with at least a draw, but I think this could get out of hand, especially if every, the first choice players play for the most part. I'm going to say RSL makes another statement win here, keeps the streak going. I see a 3-1 win for RSL. LAFC at home against San Jose. LAFC just drew to Austin 1-1 It took a really late goal, and shout out to Kai Kamara. He scored that goal, and now he's tied Landon Donovan for most goals in MLS history. So props to him. He's been on like half the teams in MLS, and he's still pushing it and looking to break that record soon. Here, he's been starting for as that striker spot since Giroud's not here yet. So yeah, they're looking for another home win. They were 6 wins in a row before this game, and their last loss actually came to San Jose back when they played at Levi's Stadium. That was a shocking game because San Jose has been atrocious all year. They only have 3 wins this season, and one of those, like I just said, was against LAFC. But yeah, they just keep finding ways to lose. And yeah, if it's not, conceding multiple goals when they're in close games, they shoot themselves in the foot like they did against Portland this past game. And there's no reason to trust them here. The defense is in shambles. They've had a lot of reserves with even though their defense hasn't been good, some of their starters are out, so that just makes matters even worse. Their goalkeeping has been super underperforming, and LAFC's home form just can't be denied. So this should be pretty straightforward. I'd be shocked if San Jose made this close. I'd be shocked if LAFC didn't score 3 or more goals, just based on the way these teams like to play. San Jose, even if they want to bunker down, just aren't capable of it. And this could be one of those usual LAFC routes at home. I'm going to say, be generous, I'm going to say 3-0 because LAFC's defense has been super, super important for them, and their push for the top of the West this year, it's been really impressive. So I don't even think San Jose gets on the board. So yeah, once again, 3-0 to LAFC. The Timbers get back home in this one. They're hosting Vancouver, who was on a bye midweek. The Timbers were on a bye this past weekend, and then they just got that win at San Jose during the middle of the week. So they're definitely the more informed team. Vancouver, their last game was a loss to the Revs on the road. Super disappointing. They've kind of been stumbling in the past month and a half, really struggling to score goals as well. Brian White, I think, was just really overperforming last year, and that partnership with Gauld has been super important for them, but they're definitely, it's just the sum of their parts, really. Like, they don't have super top-end talent. They just have a really good floor, and it's just really shown in some of these matches when you need someone who can really put away these chances in games that are close, where 3 points are super important. They just really haven't come through this year in those situations like they did last year. So they also have a couple midfielders out, key midfielders to their system. They're at Copa America, like Cubas and Ahmed. And Kralak might be questionable here, not play. He usually doesn't even start, but that's also, just another option that could be helpful, that might not be there. So, the Timbers defense has been atrocious as well. Obviously, they're sitting in 7th now after that big win, so kudos to them. Even with Miller, Araujo, and Crepeau out, who just had a huge performance against Messi and Argentina in that opening Copa America game. Even without those 3, this defense, with or without them, right, has been super bad. They did hold St. Louis to a clean sheet, and I think a clean sheet before that, but not very reliable. I think Vancouver, despite their struggles here, could definitely score, but it's been too big of a road stretch for them as well, even with this little bit of a bye they had. Timbers are in a little bit of a better form. I'm going to go 2-1 Timbers here, since I think with the reverse fixture was 3-2 to Whitecaps. They choked a 2-0 lead in that game and then got one late. It's really hard to trust either side, but once again, I think the home boost just gets them over that line. They're a little bit more informed. They didn't really have to travel midweek. Obviously, it's just to San Jose, so I think, once again, 2-1 to Timbers in what should be a really contested game. Sounders get to be back at home against Dallas in this one after that 2-2 draw on the road against Dynamo. Dallas with that huge win, huge morale boost to push them to 2 straight wins with that Musa hat trick. And yeah, 10th and 11th here in the standings. Sounders really haven't been impressive in general this year, especially at home. They only have 2 wins in their 8 games at home. Only one of those games has had at least 3 goals, and that only game was that 5-0 rout against Montreal. So really, they've been struggling to score. The creativity isn't there. Without De La Vega, we really haven't seen the true potential of this team and what he can really bring to them. And it's a lot of aging pieces. Dallas's defense has been pretty poor this year for the most part, but they're definitely the more confident team ahead of this match, and they will have to travel a bit here. It's a pretty decent length or distance rather, and I see them locking down a little bit more. They're definitely in higher spirits. Sounders defense has been pretty average, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dallas got a point out of this one. Honestly, I don't see the Sounders making too much of this Dallas defense. It doesn't really matter who they played. They haven't really looked too threatening. So I think Dallas gets something in this one. I'm not going to go for 3 points because it's a little reactionary after only a couple wins for them. So I'm going to go 1-1 here in another really low scoring, probably low event game. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you enjoyed the content. And if you're interested in any more MLS discussion and news, I have a Twitter account. Make sure to follow that. It's at MLS Digest. We post about everything and anything MLS. And then also I post my betting picks on there, especially if some of these videos I do don't include those for each slate, like the past video and this one, because of the congested schedules and uncertainty surrounding the lineups. So I think there's going to be way more rotation, especially for this weekend's games compared to the midweek slate, since it's the end of this kind of congested week. So once again, if you want any news, any picks, it's going to come around during those lineups. And the news is just 24/7 in MLS, especially as we get into this summer transfer window. So once again, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in next week's slate preview.